Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all so much for coming. My name is Jonathan Camboris, and I am the museum administrator here at the Youngstown Historical Center of Industry and Labor, otherwise known as the Steel Museum, or YICL for our acronym. We are pleased to have our second speaker here today, Brooke Bobovynik. And what I will do at the beginning is just do a brief introduction here. Our curator, we are missing him, but he is on a road to recovery now as he was just discharged from the hospital. So I have a recording from Stephanie's prior talk, and that was such an excellent experience. And Dr. John Liana, he would be able to explain this much better and in a much more captivating way. And he is one of a kind if you haven't met him before. So we are very pleased to have you all here today. Brooke has been an intern and a former co-worker here when we were both working through the graduate program of applied history. I just wanted to basically update, do a couple of housekeeping things here. On November 1st, so that would be next week, the Robert Reeder and the Charles Darling Endowment is going to be hosting Dr. Linda Gordon, and she is a two-time Bancroft Prize-winning historian from NYU. She will discuss the Klan's rise and fall, drawing from her book, The Second Coming of the Ku Klux Klan. The date on November 1st marks the 100th anniversary of the Niles, Ohio 1924 protests against the Ku Klux Klan. It is free and open to the public. That'll be at 6 o'clock. All right. If you didn't have a program, they are located just right outside the door. And it kind of just gives a brief history about the area as well as our mission in our collection. So our mission here is to collect, preserve, and interpret industrial and labor history of the Mahoning Valley, the region, and the state of Ohio. Our vision is to keep history alive, relevant, and interesting. The museum is one of the anchors of downtown, connecting it with the university and the larger community. Part of this mission is to embrace our exhibits with compatible programming such as this lecture series, which we have presented in its second year. So for more than 30 years, YICL and its staff and its students has collected objects, documents, newspapers, photographs, films, oral histories, and other materials related to the iron and steel industries, including everything from industrial technology to the lives of everyday workers and their place in the greater Mahoning Valley. This evidence of our past helps us to understand what happened and why, and disseminate that to the broadest audience possible. This is steel culture, and it is in Youngstown. So I am going to now allow Jacob, our lovely also former coworker and a memorable gentleman here, to play Dr. John Liana, and we'll cut it just briefly short so that I could introduce Bill Lawson, the director of the Mahoning Valley Historical Society. All right, you guys. So number one, John, if you're listening, get well soon, buddy. We need you back. And I'd like to offer him a round of applause if you guys can indulge me, because we wouldn't be able to do this without him. So I'm going to introduce a long-standing member of the Mahoning Valley and a person who has paved a path as far back as I know, and that was very recent, but I know it went well before then. Dr. Leary, God bless his memory, and Bill Johnson really paved a path for the applied history program and nurtured students to engage in our local history. So without further ado, Bill Lawson, he is the director of the Mahoning Valley Historical Society and an inspiration to many young historians. Bill.
Well, thank you, Jonathan. Wasn't expecting that, but as you can see, there's kind of a tight-knit group here in terms of people who are actively involved with and passionate about local history and the whole field of public history. And that's good, not only for those of us that maintain collections and operate museums and historic sites, but the whole community. So we need to appreciate that. And my role tonight is to introduce our speaker, who is also a colleague of mine and up and coming in this profession, Brooke Bobovynik. Brooke has always had a fascination with history, and she's known for a while that she wanted to pursue a career in this field. She completed her Bachelor of Arts degree in history at Youngstown State University in May 2020. She then went on to earn a Master of Arts degree in history with a certificate in applied history from YSU in May of 2022. As Jonathan mentioned, during her undergraduate studies in 2018, Brooke completed an internship here at the Youngstown Historical Center of Industry and Labor. Her projects included producing a video of the rise and fall of the steel industry in Youngstown and creating children's educational activities for the museum's outreach programs and community events such as Riverfest. Later, during her graduate studies, Brooke completed another internship, this in 2021, with Mahoning Valley Historical Society at the Arms Family Museum. There, she inventoried numerous artifacts and cataloged Native American projectile points and clothing from the MVHS costume collection into our Past Perfect Museum Collections database. In June 2022, she joined the MVHS staff as a curatorial assistant at the Arms Family Museum. Her work includes scheduling and training museum guides and visitor service representatives, assisting with curation and installation of exhibits, inventory, cataloging, and research of our three-dimensional objects in the collection, and contributions of articles and social media posts to promote understanding of the Historical Society's collections. And with that, I give you Brooke Bobovynik.
Welcome, everybody. Thanks for coming. Okay. In 1905, the construction of the house at 648 Wick Avenue, known as Greystone, was completed. Designed by Olive Freeman Arms, it was the home for her and her husband Wilford for many years. Following Olive's death in 1960, the house was bequeathed to the Mahoning Valley Historical Society, of which Olive was a member. Portions of Olive's last will and testament read as follows, quote, "I have long been interested in the affairs and purposes of the Mahoning Valley Historical Society, a nonprofit corporation organized for the purpose of perpetuating the history of the Mahoning Valley. Accordingly, and in memory of my father, Charles Dayton Arms, and of my mother, Hannah Wick Arms, and for the purpose of carrying out the considerations that have been uppermost in my mind for many years, I now give, devise, and bequeath my residence property at 648 Wick Avenue, including the buildings and lands appertinent thereto, and all of the furniture, furnishings, fixtures, household effects, silver, linens, books, documents, ornaments, works of art, paintings, rugs, antiques, and other articles and documents of artistic value and of historical and educational interest to said Mahoning Valley Historical Society," end quote. Olive designated her house to be turned into a public museum, which, quote, "shall be called the Arms Museum for the collection, housing, display, exhibition, and preservation of articles of historical and educational interest. All of the personal property herein bequeathed to said society shall be kept on the first or ground floor of my said residence property, and that the rooms of the said first floor shall be used for the display of my possessions only," end quote. Such possessions of Olive's at the time of her death included personal items of her own, as well as those inherited from her parents, her husband, and her 5 older sisters. On February 22nd of 1964, the Arms Museum, set in Olive's 1905 mansion, was opened to the public. 60 years have since passed, and the now renamed Arms Family Museum continues to preserve and share the early history of Youngstown, as well as the story of the Arms family through guided tours, exhibits and programs, and weekly online postings. Today, the Arms family, which consisted of Charles Dayton Arms, Hannah Wick Arms, and their 6 daughters, Sarah, Annie, Carolyn, Catherine, Laura Bell, and Olive, is considered as one of the prominent early families of Youngstown. To understand their importance in local history, it is necessary to trace the family's genealogy, discuss their involvement in the Mahoning Valley's iron and steel industries, as well as examine Olive's legacy, the Arms Family Museum. Unknown to many, the Arms family is connected to several other families, including the Wicks, Bonnells, Hitchcocks, Warners, Booths, Pollocks, and Fords. These families were pioneers in the coal mining, iron, and early steel industries in the valley. The Wick connection began with Hannah Wick Arms, the mother of Olive Arms. Hannah, who came from family wealth, was the daughter of Caleb Baldwin Wick Sr., born in 1795, and his second wife, Maria Adelia Griffith. Caleb's parents were Henry Wick and Hannah Baldwin. Henry, born in Long Island in 1771, arrived in Youngstown around 1801 and operated a general store on the southeast corner of the Central Square. His wife Hannah, who was born in 1779, was the daughter of Caleb Baldwin, a tavern keeper, farmer, and the first justice of the peace of Youngstown. Henry and Hannah Wick had 12 children, and 4 of their sons, including Caleb, found success in the Mahoning Valley's iron industry. In 1846, brothers Caleb, Henry Jr., Hugh, and Paul became 4 of the incorporators of the first finishing mill in the Mahoning Valley. The mill was located along the north side of the Mahoning River and contained 4 puddling furnaces, 8 nail cutting machines, 2 heating furnaces, 1 annealing furnace, 1 muck bar train, 1 12-inch bar mill train, and 1 nail plate mill. For those who do not know what those terms mean, don't worry, I have a slide at the end of the presentation. According to Joseph Butler Jr., the mill produced bars, bands, nails, and sheets from puddled iron. It had a daily capacity of 7 tons, but only operated for a short time before shutting down. In 1855, the mill was then sold to William Bonnell and the Brown brothers, Joseph, Richard, and Thomas, and became Brown, Bonnell and Company. And I'll circle back to this shortly. According to Clayton Ruminski, author of Iron Valley, the transformation of the iron industry in Ohio's Mahoning Valley from 1802 to 1913, following the sale, the mill expanded to include 9 puddling furnaces, 3 heating furnaces, 3 muck bar trains, and 16 nail machines. In 1857, the mill produced 125 tons of wrought iron spikes and nails per month and 240 tons of various sizes of finished iron. The Wick brothers, excluding Caleb, continued to be active in the industrial world while also expanding into the banking and real estate businesses. Caleb Wick Sr., who retired in 1848, managed his estate until his death in 1865. He had worked as a merchant for most of his life in addition to founding this finishing mill. A fun fact about him, he established the first joint general store and pharmacy in Youngstown in 1815 with Dr. Henry Manning. Hugh Bryson Wick became affiliated with the HB and H. Wick Banking in Cleveland. The Wick Brothers and Company Banking in Youngstown after 1857, became the director of the Mercer Mining and Manufacturing Company, which operated coal mines in western Pennsylvania, and served as director of the Shenango and Allegheny Railroad Company, which was established in 1869. Paul Wick organized the Wick Brothers and Company banking firm in 1866, the Paul Wick Real Estate Company, and was also an incorporator of the Youngstown Rolling Mill Company in 1871. In addition, he became an incorporator of the Ohio Iron and Steel Company in February of 1880. This company's furnace, known as the Mary Furnace, and located in Lowellville, became the first furnace to smelt iron ore with raw coal. Between 1880 and 1884, the Ohio Iron and Steel Company produced 28 tons of pig iron daily. Its pig iron consisted of Lake Superior ore and Ohio Scotch, made from the mixture of Briar Hill coal and Black Band ore mined in Mineral Ridge. In 1918, the Mary Furnace was sold to the Sharon Steel Hoop Company. Henry Wick Jr. Relocated to Cleveland and became involved in the banking business, first with the firm of Wick, Otis, and Brownell. This firm consisted of Henry, his brother Hugh, W.A. Otis, W.F. Otis, and Honorable A.C. Brownell. Henry ran the bank after Otis and Brownell left, which then became H.B. and H. Wick. Henry bought out his brother in 1857, and the bank was then organized as Henry Wick and Company, with Henry's sons Alfred, Dudley, and Henry Clarence. In 1891, the bank then became the Wick Banking and Trust Company. Following in the footsteps of their fathers, the sons of the Wick brothers also found themselves playing an active role in furthering the industrial and business developments in Youngstown and the Mahoning Valley. John C. Wick, he's bottom left, was born in 1835 to Hugh Bryson and his wife Lucretia Winchell, and became an incorporator of the Ohio Iron and Steel Company in 1880 and later served as its vice president. He was also the general manager of the Girard Rolling Mill, founded in 1872. This mill was a producer of agricultural implements, such as tooth iron for thrashers, and chains, nuts, and bolts. It eventually grew to employ 153 people and reached a capacity of 1,000 tons per month. It was absorbed by Carnegie Steel, which later became a part of U.S. Steel. The mill was then dismantled in 1905. John married Caroline Bonnell, a daughter of William Bonnell, one of the founders of Brown, Bonnell and Company. Next is Caleb Baldwin Wick Jr., born in 1836, was the brother of Hannah Wick Arms. He was an incorporator of the Valley Iron Company in 1871, which was located on Youngstown's east side. This plant, a producer of large and small iron rails, became the largest single rolling mill in the area. In 1873, the mill contained 24 puddling furnaces and had an annual capacity of 20,000 tons. However, the Panic of 1873 severely impacted the company and it filed for bankruptcy. Caleb Wick Jr. was also involved in the organization and the development of the Pittsburgh, Youngstown, and Ashtabula Railroad and served as president of the Youngstown and Sharon Steel Railroad Company. Henry K. Wick, another brother to Hannah Wick Arms, was also an incorporator of the Valley Iron Company, a stockholder in Youngstown Sheet and Tube, and the developer of a mill in Niles that produced Russian sheet iron. This type of iron was of high quality and heat resistant. According to his obituary, the mill was later sold to James Ward and Company. Henry K. Wick was, in addition, the founder and president of the H.K. Wick Coal Company, a leading coal company in the country with headquarters in Buffalo, and a founder of the Republic Rubber Company in 1901. Henry Wick, born in 1846 to Hugh Wick and Lucretia Winchell, was the founder and president of the Witch Hazel Coal Company in Youngstown. He also organized the Youngstown Rolling Mill Company in 1871. This company was a producer of muck iron, iron rails and borings, horseshoes, turnings, car axles, cattle guards, and flaring and riveting hooks. According to the 1880 census, the company had an 8,000-ton annual capacity and employed 350 people. In 1891, the company became Youngstown Iron and Steel, in which Henry served as president. Then in 1898, Youngstown Iron and Steel was sold to the National Steel Company, and then later acquired by American Steel Hoop Company in Pittsburgh. Henry also served as president of the Girard Rolling Mill and became an incorporator of the Ohio Iron and Steel Company, serving as its vice president for many years. Henry Wick later became the first to bring steel production into the area. In 1892, he organized and led the Ohio Steel Company, the first to manufacture Bessemer steel. The plant began operations in 1895 and included four cupolas, 2 10-ton converters, 4 4-hole soaking pit furnaces, a 34-inch blooming mill, and a 23-inch mill for billets, sheets, and tin plate bars. In that year, the company produced 833,858 tons of steel. In 1899, the company was acquired by National Steel, which Henry also served as president. Around 1901, National Steel became part of the U.S. Steel Corporation. Later in his life, Henry became director of the Youngstown Sheet and Tube Company, which was founded by his cousin, George D. Wick. In 1869, Henry Wick married Mary Arms, the daughter of Myron Arms and Emmeline Warner. Next, we have Myron C. Wick, born in 1848 to Paul Wick and Susan Bull. He was an incorporator of the Valley Iron Company in 1871. Beginning in 1878, Myron became affiliated with the Girard Rolling Mill, later serving as its secretary-treasurer. He was an incorporator of the Ohio Iron and Steel Company in 1880 and the Ohio Steel Company in 1892. He also served as president of the Union Iron and Steel Company, formed in 1892, with the combination of the Wick family rolling mills in Girard, Warren, and Youngstown. Union Iron and Steel included the first continuous and semi-continuous rolling mills built in the Mahoning Valley. The company was later taken over by National Steel in 1899. Now, as stated in his obituary, Myron Wick was, at the time of his death in 1910, vice president and director of the First National Bank, director of the Republic Rubber Company, director of the Dollar Savings and Trust Company, and director of the Realty Trust Company. Myron's second wife was Elizabeth Bonnell, who was the youngest daughter of William Bonnell. George D. Wick, Myron's brother, was president of the Trumbull Iron Company in Girard, vice president of the Union Iron and Steel Company, and president of the Mahoning Valley Iron Company, formed in 1879. However, his notable business undertaking was his founding of Youngstown Sheet and Tube in 1900. Youngstown Sheet and Tube was the country's largest producer of steel and Ohio's largest employer. Between 1901 and 1902, the company's main plant, Campbell Works, was built. According to Joseph G. Butler, Jr., Campbell Works initially contained 15 double puddling furnaces, a muck bar mill, a scalp mill, 3 tube mills, and 6 sheet mills. It grew to include a Bessemer steel plant, 6 blast furnaces, 12 open hearth furnaces, a plate mill, a byproduct coke plant, hundreds of byproduct coke ovens, nail and fence making machinery, hoop and wire machinery, machine shops, and power plants. The company continued to expand with new equipment for the manufacture of its products, which included steel ingots, scalp, slabs, billets, sheet bars, pipes, sheets, and wires, just to name a few. Wick served as the company's president until 1904. In 1923, Youngstown Sheet and Tube acquired plants in South Chicago and East Chicago, employing over 4,000. Youngstown Sheet and Tube operated until its closing in 1977. Now, in June of 1896, George D. Wick married Mary Peebles Hitchcock. She was the daughter of William James Hitchcock, partner in the Andrews and Hitchcock Iron Company, which was founded in 1859. The company operated blast furnaces in Hubbard, and in 1875, the company contained a coal mining capacity of 450 tons per day. It was later absorbed by Youngstown Sheet and Tube in 1916. So pictured here are some of the homes of the Wick family members. Most of the Wick residences were scattered along Wick Avenue, which was then known as Millionaires Row. Caleb B. Wick Sr. lived at this house, the top left, with his family on the corner of North Hazel Street and West Federal Street. His daughter, Hannah, married Charles Dayton Arms in this house in 1852. Their 2 eldest daughters, Sarah and Annie, were born here. This portrait of the home hangs in the sitting room of the Arms Family Museum. And the home was later raised for the Paramount Theater, which was then demolished in 2013. Caleb B. Wick Jr.'s house is the bottom left, was located at 524 Wick Avenue. He lived here in the later years of his life, and at one time, it served as offices for the National Steel Company. The Butler Institute of American Art now occupies this site. George D. Wick's house is the bottom right at 656 Wick Avenue and was built in 1906. He lived here with his wife and stepdaughter until his death in 1912. They were neighbors of Olive and Wilford Arms. The house is now occupied by Youngstown State University and used for student housing. The homes of John C. Wick and Henry Wick, located in the top right corner, were once at 410 and 416 Wick Avenue. In the 1920s, the Youngstown YMCA used these mansions for classrooms. John's mansion was replaced by what is now Jones Hall in 1931. Henry's mansion was purchased by Youngstown College, now YSU, in 1933. In the 1970s, it was raised for the construction of Mogg Library. The mansion of Henry K. Wick, in the top center, was built in 1914 and located across the street from Youngstown Country Club on Logan Avenue. Wick lived here until his death in 1916. Following his wife's death in 1953, the house came under the possession of the Ursuline sisters. The house was later sold and then demolished in the 1960s. The house at 603 Wick Avenue bottom middle. Now the home of YSU's president was built in 1891 by a provision of the Paul Wick estate for his second wife, Margaret Haney Wick. However, Paul's daughter Mary and her husband Porter Pollock moved into the house. Mary and Porter were married on October 14th, 1897. Now, Porter was the son of William Pollock, the founder of the William Pollock Company in 1863. This company was initially known as the Mahoning Boiler Works and located on Basin Street along the P&O Canal. It was later renamed and became known for its production of iron and steel castings for blast furnaces, boilers, rail cars, and open hearth steel ladles. The company built several blast furnaces in the Mahoning and Shenango valleys, including the Mary Furnace in Lowville, which I mentioned earlier, and the Niles Furnace for the James Warden Company. Porter Pollock served as president of the William B. Pollock Company from around 1920 until his death in 1931. The beginning of the Bonnell family in Youngstown can be traced back to William Bonnell. William Bonnell was born in Yorkshire, England in 1810. He immigrated to the United States in 1845 and settled in Newcastle, Pennsylvania, working as an iron worker before making his way to Youngstown. He, along with the Brown brothers, Joseph, Richard, and Thomas, founded Brown, Bonnell and Company, which was later incorporated in 1875. The company became one of the largest producers of iron in the country. Brown, Bonnell and Company purchased Youngstown's first finishing mill in 1855 and expanded its operations, as noted earlier. According to Clayton Ruminski, in 1860, Brown, Bonnell and Company employed over 200 men and manufactured 55,000 to 60,000 kegs of nails and 3,000 tons of finished iron. During the time of its incorporation, the company contained 3 blast furnaces, 54 puddling furnaces, 40 nail machines, 11 heating furnaces, among other machinery. The company obtained its fuel from local coal mines and beehive coke ovens in Dunbar, Pennsylvania. Brown Bonnell became known for its process of puddling iron, in which pig iron was placed in a puddling furnace, then heated to get rid of the carbon and impurities. As the iron was heated, it was stirred using long-handled tools, as illustrated in the photo above. After some time, the molten iron thickened and was shaped into balls by a puddler. These iron balls were then taken out of the furnace to be rolled out to produce bars and rods. Now, William's 3 sons, Henry, Martin, and William Scott, also became involved in the company. Henry became its president, and William Scott served as its vice president. Martin was made partner. In addition, Bonnell's 2 nephews from England, John and Harry, joined the company. John, who immigrated to Youngstown in 1865, worked as a shipping clerk in the rolling mill. In 1879, Brown, Bonnell and Company was sold to a group of capitalists, then in 1899 acquired by Republic Iron and Steel. Henry became associated later with the Mahoning Valley Iron Company and a president of the Ohio Steel Company. William Scott became a vice president of the Mahoning Valley Iron Company and later married Lucretia Wick, who was the daughter of Hugh B. Wick. Martin married Sarah Arms, the eldest daughter of Charles Dayton Arms, and later moved to Cleveland, where he became affiliated with the iron manufacturer, Bonnell, Botsford and Company. John Bonnell was involved with the Mahoning Valley Iron Company from 1883 until his death in 1884. He married Emily Wick, daughter of Hugh B. Wick, in 1875. His son Joseph, born just a year later in 1876, later served as a director of the Ohio Iron and Steel Company. Harry Bonnell became the manager of the shafting department at Mahoning Valley Iron Company, and he later married Annie Arms, the second eldest daughter of Charles Dayton Arms, in 1886. Now, John Bonnell's house was located at 315 Wick Avenue. In 1923, the mansion was leased by YMCA for the use of classrooms and became the home of the Youngstown Institute of Technology, which is now YSU. In 1926, the school moved out of the Bonnell Mansion. Today, the Youngstown Public Library occupies this site. Harry Bonnell and Annie moved into the Charles Dayton Arms home at 626 Wick Avenue following the death of Hannah Wick Arms in 1898. Annie remained here with Harry until his death in 1919, then moved to Pasadena, California. In the 1940s, the house was purchased by the Holy Trinity Romanian Orthodox Church. The church was dedicated in 1945. So the union of Hannah Wick and Charles Dayton Arms in August of 1852 created an advantageous life for their family. Hannah's inherited wealth and her family's connection to the Bonnells, Pollocks, and Hitchcocks, paired with Charles's own industrial interests and familial connections, provided financial and social stability for their daughters, Sarah, Annie, Catherine, Carolyn, Laurabelle, and Olive, and turned the Arms family name into one of prestige. The Arms family, originating from Sodus, New York, consisted of Israel Arms, who passed in 1838, his wife Sarah Axtell Arms, and their children, Jane, Myron, Freeman, Charles Dayton Arms, Sophia, and Henry, who died as an infant. Sarah and the children arrived in Youngstown in 1847. Soon after their arrival, the sons developed interests in the valley's iron industry. Myron Israel, born in 1822, became the manager of the Eagle Furnace. The Eagle Furnace, built in 1856 by Lemuel Crawford, was the largest stack erected in Youngstown. It had the ability to produce close to 20 tons of iron per day. This furnace was eventually taken over by Brown, Bonnell and Company. In 1848, Myron married Emmeline Warner, the daughter of Jonathan Warner. And Jonathan Warner was an iron pioneer in Youngstown and most notably Mineral Ridge. He partnered with James Wood, operator of the Eagle Iron Works in Pennsylvania, in establishing Wood, Warner and Company in 1858. Together, Warner and Wood built the Ashland Furnace in 1860, which produced 18 to 20 tons of iron per day. Afterwards, in 1864, Warner solely oversaw the construction of the Porter Furnace, Mineral Ridge's second furnace. In addition, he was a founder of the Mineral Ridge Iron and Coal Company in 1866. Unfortunately, the Panic of 1873 led to the downfall of his businesses. Myron Arms later died in 1864 from typhoid fever while serving in the Union Army. His son, Myron Jr., likewise became involved in the iron industry. He managed the Falcon Iron and Nail Company in the 1880s. Under his management, the plant produced 20 tons of finished iron per day. Myron Sr.'s youngest daughter, Harriet, born in 1861, married Charles H. Booth in 1887. Booth, who arrived in Youngstown in 1867, was the vice president of the United Engineering and Foundry Company, organized in 1901. United Engineering and Foundry was a producer of rolling mill machinery. Booth was also a director of General Fireproofing, founded in 1902, a director of the Republic Rubber Company, chairman of the board of directors of the Ohio Leather Company in Girard, which was the largest manufacturer of calf leather goods in the U.S., and a director of Youngstown Sheet and Tube. Freeman Arms, the third eldest child of Sarah Axtell Arms, was born in 1824. In 1868, he was appointed the vice president of the First National Bank. In 1871, he joined the board of trustees of the Youngstown Water Works. During the 1870s, Freeman reorganized the Falcon Iron and Nail Company in Niles, originally built in 1866 by James Ward and Company. He retired in 1879 and was replaced by John Stambaugh. Now, Freeman's daughter, Carolyn, married Todd Ford in 1878. Todd Ford, who lived from 1854 to 1907, was a president of the Botswick Steel Lath Company in Niles, which was founded in 1891. The company, which later dissolved in 1988, was a producer of metal lath and other forms of shaped steel. According to the obituary, which appeared in the Youngstown Vindicator on Friday evening of January 17th, 1896, Charles Dayton Arms operated coal mines in Brookfield and was a partner in the Churchill Coal Company, founded in 1864 in Liberty. Joe Tucciarone and Ben Larisha, authors of Coal War in the Mahoning Valley, The Origin of Greater Youngstown's Italians, wrote the following about the Churchill Coal Company, quote, "By the end of 1868, 100 tons of fine block coal were hauled out of the Churchill mines every day. By the middle of the 1870s, hundreds of men were digging beneath Churchill's cornfields, where peak production reached more than 500 tons of coal per day." End quote. Though prosperous in the beginning, the Churchill Coal Company did not last long, as its mines quickly depleted. Charles later became an incorporator of the Valley Iron Company in 1871. Then 8 years later, in 1879, he joined Henry Bonnell and William Scott Bonnell, Richard Brown, and others in founding the Mahoning Valley Iron Company. This was formed from the defunct rail mill built by the Valley Iron Company on Youngstown's east side. Mahoning Valley Iron Company was a producer of merchant bar iron and other wrought iron products, and later iron shafting and pig iron. As stated in the 1880 census, the Mahoning Valley Iron Company had an annual capacity of 4,500 tons and employed 363 people. It was taken over by Republic Iron and Steel in 1899. And the Valley Iron Company is circled below in that on the Sanborn map. Besides his interest in local coal and iron, Charles Dayton Arms also invested in gold and silver mines in Arizona, Colorado, and New Mexico. One such mine was known as the Smuggler Mine in Aspen, Colorado, rich in silver. At the time of his death, Charles Dayton Arms' estate was estimated at around $40 million, just over $1.5 billion today. The original mansion at 606 Wick Avenue was built in 1865 by Emmeline Warner Arms, and this is the mansion in the top left corner. Emmeline lived here until her death in 1897. Her daughter, Harriet, and her husband, Charles Booth, lived in the house after Emmeline's passing. The couple completely remodeled the home in the early 1900s. Harriet lived in the house until her death in 1952. In 1959, the house was sold to First Christian Church and became the Disciple House. Then in 1966, the house was purchased by Youngstown State University. Today, it is known as Folk Hall and houses the Honors College. And there's a picture of Folk Hall just below it, so you can kind of see the big difference architecturally. Built in 1881 in the Romanesque Revival style, the house at 626 Wick Avenue was originally the home of Charles Dayton Arms and his family. Top right corner of the screen. This is where Olive and 3 of her siblings grew up. As stated earlier, Annie Arms and her husband, Harry Bonnell, moved into the home following the death of Hannah Arms in 1898. The home became the Holy Trinity Romanian Orthodox Church in 1945. The mansion at 616 Wick Avenue, which is bottom right corner, no longer exists, but it was once the home of Catherine Arms, Olive's older sister, and her husband, Alfred Rice. Catherine, who was the first local woman to drive an automobile, fun fact, lived here until Alfred's death in 1917, then built a house at 1414 Fifth Avenue. In the 1940s, Catherine Wick's Avenue home became the Dana School of Music. Wilford Arms, the son of Olive Arms, was born in 1861 in New Jersey. He was the eldest of 3 children born to Lawson Arms and Harriet Paddock. Wilford came to Youngstown in 1888, and it was here he became affiliated with the Falcon Iron and Nail Company, the Trumbull Iron Company, the Warren Rolling Mill Company, and the Briar Hill Iron and Coal Company. Briar Hill Iron and Coal had been incorporated in 1867 by David Todd, William Pollock, Nelson Crandall, John Stambaugh Jr., and Henry Todd, and later became Briar Hill Steel in 1912. Products of this company included byproduct coke, Bessemer pig iron, sheet, tin, and merchant bars, black and galvanized sheets, and sheared plates. The company, which operated Youngstown's famous Grace and Todd furnaces, was absorbed by Youngstown Sheet and Tube in 1923. Wilford Arms also served as a director of General Fireproofing, founded in 1902, alongside Myron Arms Jr. But besides his industrial involvements in Youngstown, Wilford also helped to organize the Pittsburgh Coal Company, which later became the Pittsburgh Consolidation Coal Company in 1945. In 1958, the company's name was changed to Consolidation Coal Company. Then in 1966, the company was acquired by the Continental Oil Company. Now, in the later years of his life, Wilford developed an interest in finance. He served as a vice president of the Realty Guaranty Trust Company, then served as its president from 1941 to 1947, when it became the Realty Company. His office was located in the Realty Building, which was once located in Central Square. Wilford Arms married Olive Arms in the Charles Dayton Arms Mansion on April 6, 1899. He passed away in 1947. And fun fact, Wilford and Olive were half first cousins once removed. So Wilford's grandfather, Daniel Arms, was Olive's great-grandfather. On March 30th, 1961, Mahoning Valley Historical Society trustees and executors of Olive Arms' estate met in the dining room of Greystone to transfer the property to the Historical Society and form the Arms Museum. Nearly 3 years later, the museum opened its doors to the public, receiving almost 3,500 visitors in its first year of operation. Although the second floor has been completely remodeled for exhibit space, each room on the first floor was carefully arranged by Olive Arms before her death. A space frozen in time, these rooms illustrate the story of the Arms family through artwork, photographs, and three-dimensional artifacts. The reception room best reflects the arts and crafts style in which the home was designed. The fireplace, inspired by one seen in Holland by Olive, was designed by Olive Arms and is made of hand-hammered iron. The hood weighs a total of 168 pounds. The barrel-vaulted ceilings display a hint of hand-stenciled ivy leaves. And then on the main staircase is a series of stained glass windows, representative of the seasons of life. The windows originated from the Charles Arms Mansion at 626 Wick Avenue. Olive and Wilford were married in front of these windows in 1899. The library, which was remodeled in the Tudor Revival style in the 1920s, features a portrait of Sarah Axtell Arms, Olive's paternal grandmother, a portrait of Annie Arms Bonnell, captured in a state of mature beauty, a portrait of 4 of the 6 Arms daughters, who were once known as, quote, the most beautiful girls in Youngstown, a writing desk that belonged to Hannah Wick Arms, and the family's collection of silver pieces. Some of the silver dates back to 1852 when Hannah and Charles were married. In the solarium, which was originally an open porch but later enclosed in the 1920s, an Italian marble statue of Romeo and Juliet, which once greeted visitors in the reception room of Charles's mansion at 626 Wick Avenue, contrasts with the preserved gray limestone of Olive's 1905 mansion. The exterior wall's gray color was a result of the soot coming from the once thriving steel mills located not too far away from the mansion. The blinking owl, which Wilford used in his office at the Realty Building to scare the pigeons away, hides in the northeast corner of the room. Above the sitting room mantel is the painting of the Caleb B. Wick Senior Mansion, commissioned in 1866 and completed in 1875 by Warren artist John Crawford, and once possessed by Catherine Arms Rice. The American colonial fireplace, designed by Olive, features a warming oven and hanging pot, illustrative of life of the early settlers. On the west wall of the sitting room hangs a series of photographs of individuals in a stagecoach, dated 1917. On several occasions, the family visited Charles's mine out west after his passing. The dining room table, set for 8, displays lace placemats, silverware, and china that belonged to the Arms girls. A silver tea set, purchased by Hannah Wick Arms in New York in 1898, rests on a marble table. The set, which had never been used by Hannah, was passed down to Catherine, Carolyn, and Olive. The cabinets in the room are arranged with small Wick and Arms family treasures, such as the black mourning brooch worn by Sarah Axtell Arms and a miniature portrait of Caleb Baldwin Wick Sr. The butler's pantry, once part of the servants' quarters and known for the original copper sink, houses the beautiful china sets of Hannah, Carolyn, Catherine, and Olive, monogram stitch cotton napkins, and few of Olive's paintings and sketches. And another fun fact, Olive studied art locally and in New York. The continuous presence and operation of the Arms Family Museum is critical in providing today's residents with the knowledge of how Youngstown and the Mahoning Valley came to be, and of some of the individuals who contributed to its development. Told from the perspective of the Arms family, these stories of triumph and tribulation are preserved within the gray limestone walls of 648 Wick Avenue. All one must do is walk the first floor and witness them come to life. And I'm going to go back because I forgot to say something real quick. So in regards to Wilford Arms, the Vindicator in 1947 released an article describing how he was as a person when he was still alive. That quote reads, Mr. Arms was a gentleman of the old school, the soul of courtesy and consideration for others. There was something refreshing and uplifting in his lifelong predilection for formality and the proprieties. It was good to have him remind us that careful attention to the graces and amenities of life adds much to one's own and others' enjoyment of it. And the black and white photo to the left is Wilford Arms sitting at a wishing well, which once resided on the property of the Arms Family Museum. And then the colored photograph to the right is Olive Arms in the hollyhocks that once grew in front of the carriage house, which is today known as the Stewart Media Archive Center. So I thought it was cool to include those photos. And some of the terms that I mentioned for those who aren't familiar with these types of terms. And that's it. Thank you, guys. I guess I can.
What did they do with the wishing well? Wishing well's gone.
Yeah, the wishing well's gone. Oh, Bill. Thank God Bill's here.
The wishing well is still on the property. It was cast concrete and had a very decorative iron over top of it. Unfortunately, the concrete split. So we covered it to protect it from further decay and taken the iron piece out of it. But I'm not sure how we're going to repair or replicate that yet.
Yes.
We're
lot of time in the Arts Museum. What room, what portion of it do you feel brings you closest to all of the family that resided in?
I would say either the library or the sitting room. Either of those two, or both of those rooms have more of the personal artifacts from the family, like photographs and artwork. Even in like the cases in the library, there's a lot of little trinkets that were passed down to Olive from the family that she arranged a certain way so visitors can view these items. And when she arranged these items in the cases, I found it fascinating to learn that she arranged them by color. So a lot of the books that are currently displayed in those cases, they're not necessarily arranged by volume, they're just arranged by color. So she was very particular in how she wanted her house to look like. She already had plans set up to turn it into a museum. So I found that really interesting. Yep.
You mentioned that George Wick was one of the founders of Youngstown Sheep Tube, I believe.
Yeah.
And his death was in 1912. Was that the Wick that was on the Titanic?
Yes. Yeah. So George D. Wick, who I mentioned in my presentation earlier, was the Wick that unfortunately went down with the Titanic when it sank, April 15th, 1912. Now, when he was on the Titanic, his health was failing, so he took a trip abroad to kind of help with his failing health. He took along with him his stepdaughter, I believe her mother, and a cousin and an aunt. And the rule being then women in the lifeboats first. All of them survived. Unfortunately, he stayed on the ship when it went down. So that's our local connection to the Titanic disaster. And because his body was never recovered in the wreck, in Oak Hill Cemetery, they have a little plot for him. So everybody who goes and visits the cemetery remembers him. There's no body buried there, but they still have a stone there with his name on it and everything. So he's not forgotten. Yeah. We have a couple of photos before the library was remodeled, particularly of the fireplace. For those who have been to the Arms Museum recently, you notice it's in the library, it's very elegant and light in color, and the fireplace itself is like a decorative stone. The original fireplace would have looked a lot like the fireplace in the reception room. It didn't necessarily have that huge, it had a huge hood, but it didn't have the same exact like hood design, but there was a lot of hand hammered iron on the fireplace. And she lived in that house for 50 plus years. So over the years, her styles changed. So she was actually supposed to build a second residence in Liberty Township, and this was around the time Wilford's health was failing. So they decided to just stay at Greystone and incorporate some of those designs for their new house into Greystone. So.
Question right here.
So, in the late 19th century, when all those wicks were creating industry and railroad and banking and everything, building houses on Wick Avenue, was there any room for anyone else in Youngstown? Like, they were obviously the predominant family.
Yeah, there's a lot of wicks, and I only covered a couple. Especially doing research, it gets very confusing with those bigger families because when they had kids, their kids' names would be the same as yours, and then they would have kids, and their kid's name would be the same as So it was definitely difficult in doing research on these big families because it's just they definitely kept similar names within the group. So I had to look close and make sure I was picking the right wick with the, matching him with the right company and so on. So do you want to take that, Bill?
The family dispersed over generations, but there are a few direct descendants still there.
Yes.
I was curious, is there any sense of their politics? I mean, we know David Todd being governor and Butler being friends with McKinley. Is there any sense of like what the Wicks's kind of stance on national politics or local politics was?
Not that I personally know, but then again, thank God Bill's here because maybe he could help.
I can only assume that from 1860 on, especially after the Civil War, 1868, that these families were Republican. It just fit into the Republican platform was very much what they, as industrialists, would agree with. Prior to that, with a few exceptions, obviously, the Democratic Party from 1803, when it was called the Democratic Republican Party, on through James Buchanan in the mid-1850s, was really the dominant political party across the country. There were others, smaller. The only other party to make it real somebody in the office of president was the Whigs. Again, didn't last very long. So it's hard to say where their politics fell before that. I'm sure Clinton didn't talk much about it. That's just my guess and assumption based on where they were in various generations and stations of life.
If you have visited the Arms or haven't yet but have heard of this, we do have a little exhibit gallery up on our second floor. It focuses on the Todd family, but it talks a lot about the politics around the 1860s. My favorite story from that exhibit is Abraham Lincoln asking Governor David Todd to be his secretary, was it treasurer? And he said, thanks, but no thanks, because again, my health is failing. We have like a little cartoon depicting that. So it's really interesting because I believe they were of opposing political sides. I think, was David Todd a Republican or was it vice versa?
Todd was a Democrat.
Okay.
Lincoln was a Republican.
Yeah.
He was the Democratic Party faction became known as the Union Party during the Civil War. They were very much loyalists to the Union. And it was because of that and then because of his personal and state efforts to support the Union cause that Lincoln really admired and relied on him for a lot. There were other Democrats in Lincoln's administration, cabinet, but his story is unique because of his connection to our community.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Brooke, personally, you've done a wonderful job. I mean, this was really excellent. It really was.
Thank you.
I guess one of my personal questions as a young public historian, what is something that you've taken with you from what you learned within the program and your experience to where you are today? Or you could reframe it to what is one thing that you can tell yourself when you first started engaging in your program or your internship?
So to go off with that last half, if I had to tell my younger self something, I would probably tell her it's definitely going to pay off. It helps a lot. I've learned how to conduct research more thoroughly, use different kinds of resources that I didn't think could be considered like resources in a way. I learned how to do a lot of like exhibit work, whether it be with researching or helping to set up an exhibit. So my time here, my internship at the Arms, my now position at the Arms has taught me, a lot. It's definitely broadened my horizons with just even general history of the area. Because like I've grown up here. I'm from here. I've never known as much of this area as I do now. So it's always interesting to learn more.
That's awesome. Well, thank you again.
Thank you.
One last round of applause. We greatly appreciate Brooke. I'd also like to thank Dr. Martha Palanti. She is the Darling Endowed Chair of Social and Public History, and she, through the endowment, helped sponsor the event. So please take as much food as you want home with you and eat as much as you can today. So thank you all again, and we'll see you back next week.